Welcome to the unboxing review of the HUION KAMVAS GT-191 graphics drawing tablet, which I was very curious about as it's only a little bit smaller but otherwise very similar to my own personal GT-220, except this one comes with the newer model HUION pen. So first off, it's those lovely people over at gearbest.com who offered to send me this tablet for review. So if you are interested, all it takes is a quick Google search of this tablet to realise that gearbest.com is probably going to be the cheapest place to pick one of these up, and as well as loads of cheap electronics, they're also hitting a big promotional discount on their mobile phones that they asked me to mention as well. Links to all of this in the description below. So this is a box you get in a post, and at first I wasn't really sure where this tablet would sit in the HUION range between the budget and the high end, but more on that later. It does in fact come in the display ready canvas packaging once you slide the box out, although on the inside it's not quite the look at me standard of packaging you might get from the 156 HD. Not that that matters. So the first box inside houses the cables and the construction bits, i.e. the screws for the stand and the screwdriver to go with. You get the USB charger for the pen, a USB connection lead for the tablet to the PC, the power socket, a cleaning cloth, the power adapter, and the pen holder itself, which has a fairly nice grain to its design, as well as the spare nibs you'd expect inside. The rest of the set slides out from the box and does have a couple of boards in the sleeve to help protect the contents, which is always a good move. You get the newer model HUION pen in a card box, not quite the full presentation pack in the 156 HD, but you do also get a spare second pen, as well as your VGA connection cables and HDMI cables as well, depending on your preference. Inside another bag is the driver software micro CD, the warranty card, and the further instructions, which of course we'll never read. Below that all, you've then got the quick release stand, which is the fairly common model you get with most of these desk tablets. It's got a wide base along with rubber grips to stop slippage on the desk, and also below that you've got the tablet itself sealed in another separate plastic bag, as well as coming with a screen protector on the top. So overall it's a good selection of kits. This is basically everything in the box. Having a second pen is definitely a nice touch as a backup, as well as just having spare nibs. And although I don't personally use one, I do think a cheeky finger glove would have rounded it off perfectly, but there's a good amount here. So then the first thing to do is screw on the stand with all of the bits included, and then we're set. So firstly, I just wanted to pop this on the desk to show you the HUION KAMVAS GT-191 graphics drawing tablet compared to my own 22-inch model. This one's 19 inches across the diagonal and has a 1920 by 1080 pixel standard resolution monitor. And here, once it's all set up, you can see how it looks in a relatively small workspace like mine alongside my main screen. When you set the stand into its flat position, it does allow you to prop the whole thing upright, courtesy of the rubber bar that's along the bottom providing the grip, and of course you've got your main 5 monitor function bottoms along the bottom edge. So all I did was plug it in at the back using the DVI port for the screen connection, the USB to connect the touch sensitivity, and the power cable. And you can see it also has a VGA port for the real old schoolers, and more importantly a HDMI port depending on your connection requirements. Then you can either pretend that you're in a 90s sci-fi film and use the tiny driver CD, or just go onto the HUION website to make sure that you're downloading the latest drivers to install for the tablet. The new driver packs that HUION use these days are easy to install and easy to use. They look fairly up to date, and once I assigned the pen function to work on the second monitor because I'm using this screen as an extension of my desktop, all I had to do was calibrate it and I was good to go. And importantly, it worked with all of the pressure settings with Photoshop straight away. However, straight out of the box, the colour levels did need a bit of adjusting as far as I was concerned. It was too far over to the blue end of the spectrum instead of the green, so I had a good fiddle about. And in case it's of any use to you guys, I found for me the best settings were brightness at 81, contrast at 34, red levels at 62, green levels at 55, and blue at 48. Basically, that's what I had to do to get it to match colour-wise with my main other monitor, although it does remain not quite as bright. For a pretty rugged desk monitor like this one, it's not overly thick, and it does use that same quick release stand which is pretty much on every Chinese desk tablet monitor out there. It works fine, feels pretty solid when you're pressing down from the top middle section and the majority of the working area, but if you press too hard at the far corners it will shift a little bit about. And although it's great for angles, you can't actually use this flat with the cables attached, although they do just avoid pinching or bending your cables too far where the base meets the desk. As mentioned, the pen itself is a newer 8192 levels pressure sensitivity pen, and you do get 2 of them. Now, I've mentioned before that this is a really nice pen to use, and it does have a fluid design that's reminiscent of old dip pens. It charges using the USB connection port in the back, and as well as the 2 buttons feeling quite nicely placed, it does also form quite ergonomically into a triangular tip, which is a bit like a training pencil. So as mentioned in a previous review, I am a big fan of these pens, although purely personally, I'd still love for it to flare outward in diameter ever so slightly just below the buttons to keep it as comfortable as possible when using over a really long period of time. If you tend to be someone who scrunches up your hand towards the tip and holds it quite tightly, you're gonna feel that after a couple of hours. But that's basically me looking for problems when there aren't really any, just so that I've got something other than pure good points to say. So the other main question, of course, is what is this going to be like to use for a proper sit down on an art piece? Well, firstly, in terms of the screen size, I was perfectly happy with the 19 inches that I was working with here, despite being worried that the 2-inch step down from my usual model would mean that I felt too cramped for a long session. So that's good, space-wise it's not too bad, but it does mean that if you're going to use this as a second monitor for general computer use like watching films, you're not going to be able to sit very far back. In terms of the colour and brightness levels of the monitor, I would describe it compared to the vibrancy of my main monitor as being spot on, but then ever so slightly washed out and less bright, as if it's being viewed through a very mildly grey filter. So you can get your work levels to be on point and well balanced, but you might then notice that a piece you finish on this monitor turns out to be a little bit more vivid when viewed on another screen. Upon first use, the screen texture felt a little bit scratchy and tough to dive into, which did worry me, but I think this was just a case of breaking in the pen nib, scratching down that tip a little bit, because after about 20 minutes it just suddenly started to feel much smoother and fluid to work with. So I think that's a combination of the nib smoothing out and perhaps also the natural oils from my hands on the screen making it nicer to use. So basically, don't freak out and feel frustrated at first. Now, another thing is that I had charged the pen using a very similar USB charger from my old model, and I started to experience instances of the pen not immediately tracking or picking up my commands. Well, it turns out it was all my fault, and despite the light going on the pen, it really hadn't fully charged. So when I actually used the USB charger included in this pack, this one actually clicked into place and clearly charged the pen up nicely, and then it was absolutely fine to work with without issue, which I only discovered about halfway into my line art drawing. Good. So I also wanted to talk about this GT-191 tablet and where it sits in the HUION range. Now, you might have seen that I've reviewed the more budget version, the GT-190 tablet monitor, and although it was serviceable, the screen ratio wasn't to standard monitor format, it got very warm during use, and the 2048 levels pressure pen was fine, but it's not the best one available. And if you look up in the other direction of the HUION going into their Kamvas range, then their more professional stuff, including the more portable GT-156 HD, tend to be really high quality tablets made out of great materials, don't get very warm at all, and I think the only problem I could pick out of them was a slightly lower level of screen brightness compared to a vivid TV monitor. And as mentioned, the only reason I don't use that GT-156 all of the time because it's a bloody good tablet is because it's designed to be a bit more portable, whereas what I need is something to sit at my desk for a long session. So talking about both ends of the range, what I'm really saying is that this one falls into a very similar place as the GT-220 version 2. It still gets a little bit warm at the top, but not as badly as the GT-190, and the screen is still just large enough to lean into and get a lot of work done for a sustained period. It comes with that better HUION pen, and the experience of using it drawing over the tablet for a long session of time felt quite nice and fluid once the pen got broken in. Now, if I could just take this pen and use it on my own larger tablet, I'd do exactly that. But the newer driver software for the GT-191 sadly isn't compatible across to my older model, so it looks like I might be sticking with the GT-191 as my main go-to desk option, simply because the screen is just still large enough and it's rock solid to lean into. So yeah, I would indeed recommend the GT-191 tablet when it comes to the amount of quality you're getting out of this compared to the price that you're paying. This is a really great place to go, this or the 220 version 2 model, which, it's worth mentioning, does now come with a better pen as well compared to when I got mine. And I'd say that both of them are a great option compared to their more budget entry level of the GT-190 range, which I would suggest you just fork out a tiny bit more money and avoid. And of course, for a good sit down, it worked well with Photoshop and managed to keep me happy. So a great big thank you to those lovely people again over at gearbest.com for sending me this tablet for review. They are of course a massive distributor of electronics right across the board, so I do always recommend taking a look at their website and seeing what's going on, because loads of their stuff is way cheaper than buying elsewhere. They've got loads of promotions on all the time, and of course there's links in the description below. So thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you found this unboxing review useful, because if you're somebody who's currently looking around online trying to figure out how much they should commit for their first drawing tablet, then I really hope that this has helped give you a bit of an idea. I've actually reviewed loads of entry and budget level tablets on my channel, so do make sure you're subscribed for those and more in the future, because you might find it useful to see how they all compare. So click that button, give it a like, it really helps me out, and of course I'll see you next time. Take care.